UFC CEO and the chairman of Matchroom Boxing have spent the last few months taking shots at each other, in interviews, at press conferences, and across social media. And now, as tensions have finally boiled over, they've confronted each other directly. So let's break down how Dana White and Eddie Hearn ended up at this point. On March 5th, 2026, Dana White sat down with Piers Morgan on his show Uncensored. The conversation covered a lot of ground: Zuffa boxing, the UFC business. But one moment cut through everything else. White seemingly challenged Hearn to a boxing match on Piers Morgan's Uncensored show, declaring, "Listen, if Eddie wants to box, we can box." He repeated it for emphasis. "Listen, if Eddie wants to box, we can box." White grinned. "I don't think Eddie wants to box." When Morgan pushed further and asked if he'd be confident in such a bout, White didn't hesitate. "I used to box with all the guys back in the day, boxers and UFC guys. I have boxed." That wasn't throwaway banter. That was the CEO of the UFC on international television telling a boxing promoter he'd fight him. And inside 24 hours, the boxing promoter responded. 24 hours later, Hearn agreed to the matchup and predicted he'd knock out the MMA mogul. "Of course I'd do it," the 46-year-old insisted while chatting with IFL TV. "How could you say no? Then you'd be a wouldn't you?" Hearn immediately began thinking about the money and the spectacle. Netflix would pay an absolute fortune or live on DAZN, the global home of boxing. So I'd probably make a fortune to do it, and if I got chinned, I get chinned. Then came UFC 326. It was March 8th. Charles Oliveira had just beaten Max Holloway for the BMF title at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. White doubled down on the bizarre back and forth between the two promoters Saturday night, telling reporters at UFC 326's post-fight press conference that if Hearn does indeed want to accept White's challenge for a boxing match, then the Matchroom headman can fly to the UFC's Meta Apex facility in Las Vegas, and the two can step into the ring. White looked into the cameras and didn't mince words, and Eddie Hearn's a Pete. He don't want to thing box anybody. Come on. Eddie Hearn boxing. Listen, if that's what he wants, then fly out here. We'll go over to the Apex and we can box. He even shared that one of his own fighters had encouraged the spectacle. Last night, Zuffa boxer Callum Walsh was telling me, "We were at Power Slap and he was like, 'This thing would be huge. You should do it. You should do it. I'll fight on the undercard.' I said, 'You'll fight on the undercard? If two bums like us were going to do that, we'd be the first prelim of the night. It would be disrespectful to every guy who's a real fighter on that card to be fighting under us.' But buried inside that bravado was a concession that most people missed. White also acknowledged the absurdity of two lifelong fight promoters, one 56 years old and one 46 years old, entertaining this type of narrative. It's serious and it's a joke. White said of his challenge to Hearn, "I'm effing 56 years old. I shouldn't be effing boxing anything. The last time I even tried to get ready to box was for Tito Ortiz. I was 38 and that was a thickening nightmare, okay?" That line, "It's serious and it's a joke," would end up defining the entire saga. Because while White seemed to be half joking and half daring, Eddie Hearn took it entirely at face value. To understand why two grown men who make their living promoting fighters are now threatening to fight each other, you have to understand what happened in the first few months of 2026. This didn't start with a call-out on Piers Morgan. This started with money, territory, and fighters switching sides. At the beginning of the year, Dana White made his step into the world of boxing with his new Zuffa boxing promotion. TKO Zuffa Boxing, helmed by UFC CEO White, WWE President Nick Khan, and Saudi Arabian fight financier Turki Al-Sheikh, seeks to remake the sport of boxing in its image. It was an aggressive entry, and White made no apologies for it. He said repeatedly that boxing was broken, that promoters were lazy, that the sport operated like a going-out-of-business sale. White and Hearn have had it out for each other since the former shook up the boxing industry by officially launching Zuffa Boxing at the beginning of 2026. They initially claimed to be on good terms, but the business eventually got the best of both men, and all bets were off when White called all his professional rivals babies after his third event. That was the tone. But the first real shot in this war wasn't verbal. It was transactional. Ben sent shockwaves through the sport in February when he made the surprise decision to leave Eddie Hearn's Matchroom and link up with Zuffa, a joint venture between UFC chief executive Dana White and Saudi Arabian kingpin Turki Al-Sheikh for one fight. Conor Benn had been with Matchroom for the better part of a decade. Ben's switch, leaving Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing after almost 10 years with the company, To join Dana White's new promotional powerhouse was an industry-shaking move. That initial deal was for just one fight, which meant Matchroom were unable to match the reported $15 million on offer. $15 million for one fight. That was the price it took for Dana White to pry Conor Benn from Eddie Hearn's grip. And White didn't just steal Hearn's fighter, he rubbed salt in the wound publicly. Is there a bigger peewee than Eddie Hearn? This guy, Ben, is supposed to be your friend. You're effing crying. He made more money. He's going to make more money, and Hearn had the right to match it. He could have matched it. White was telling the world that Hearn couldn't keep his own fighters because he couldn't pay them. That is, in the promotion game, about the most devastating insult you can level at a rival. It says you're not a real player. It says your promises are empty. And Hearn felt every word of it, so Hearn fired back. Not with words, but with a move that cut just as deep. UFC heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall has signed with Eddie Hearn's newly established Matchroom Talent Agency. The signing and the establishment of Matchroom's new agency was announced on Thursday. In a huge move for both Aspinall and the British promoter, Hearn, who is chairman of Matchroom Boxing and has guided the careers of former two-time heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua and two-weight undisputed women's champion Katie Taylor, will now manage and advise Aspinall in his first move into MMA. The UFC heavyweight champion joined the Matchroom Sport chairman at a packed launch press conference at London's Battersea Power Station on Friday. The optics were unmistakable. Dana White takes Hearn's boxer. Hearn takes Dana White's heavyweight champion. It was retaliatory, strategic, and designed to get under White's skin. I needed a more powerful voice in my corner to grow commercially. Inside and outside the octagon, Aspinall said. Tom Aspinall needs to be recognized for the revenue he drives, said Hearn. Tom is the elite of the elite, the baddest man on the planet in MMA. White publicly claimed it didn't bother him. We don't have any issues with Eddie. They can get whoever they want to represent them. Tito Ortiz used to represent people, and we got it done. But the barbs continued flying. White said, when I get into this, I'm like, I like Eddie Hearn. I'm not gonna mess with Eddie Hearn at all. I'm just gonna do my thing or whatever, and then as soon as I announce something, Eddie Hearn is just attacking. And then he dropped the line that would set the tone for everything after. It's just like, all right, you wanna fight. All right, let's fight then if you wanna fight. I was gonna stay in my lane and do my thing, and then he came at it. So hard. I eventually said, okay, I'm gonna give you what you're asking for, Eddie. That wasn't just promotional trash talk anymore. That was a man drawing a line and daring another man to cross it. What started as two executives lobbing insults across press conferences began to morph into something that looked, at least on paper, startlingly real, because money started showing up. KSI's Misfits Boxing has made Hearn, the Matchroom Boxing chairman, an official offer to face UFC CEO White. Hearn confirmed to Uncrown's The Ariel Helwani Show on Tuesday. The number being thrown around was $10 million each from Misfits, but that was only part of the picture. I've not received a real official offer from Turki Alalshik, Hearn said, but Turkey's kind of asked me if I'd fight White, and we've had conversations, and an offer from Misfits as well. It's quite interesting. White's kind of got me a bit excited about it, to be honest with you. He called me out on the Piers Morgan show for a fight. Then Hearn went further. I explained that I'm pretty useless. I've seen him spar. He looks quite decent. So I've got into a little bit of training. I've started to think about it. I've started to visualize my ring walk music, and I've started to get very excited about the money. Visualizing ring walk music. This man was mentally constructing his entrance. That's when you know the conversation has shifted from hypothetical to let me check my calendar. Hearn laid out the financial case with the precision of the promoter he is. You put 50-50 in a pot? I know they're not used to this model, but we'll split the revenue with the fighters, me and him, 50-50. A broadcaster wants to come in, they can take 10 or 15% of the pay-per-view. Eat what you kill. We'll make $30 million each for the fight. I'm in. $30 million each for two men who have never had a professional boxing match in their lives. That number alone tells you everything about where combat sports entertainment has gone. In the era of influencer boxing, crossover spectacles, and Saudi-bankrolled mega events. This whole thing started because Dana White said Eddie wouldn't box me. I'll box Eddie. Yeah, no problem. Now, I'm a PY and we're bums. and it would go on at the start of the night? No, wouldn't. It would go main event on probably Netflix, and it would generate it's probably the biggest fight out there right now, other than Joshua against Fury. Numbers-wise, minimum 1 million buys, easy. And here's what made this more than just two men shouting at clouds. Both men confirmed that Turki Alalshik has expressed some interest in the fight. The Saudi sports advisor who has been bankrolling massive boxing cards, the man whose checkbook helped reshape the sport's financial landscape. He was reportedly intrigued by the spectacle of White versus Hearn. Misfits has already put $10 million each on the table publicly, which is a credible number for a crossover spectacle of this kind. But if the Saudi machine fully commits, that figure climbs considerably, and at $30 million each, even the most skeptical participant starts doing math. Meanwhile, Hearn posted a video of himself training. Hearn posted a video of himself hitting a speed bag, before jokingly calling out the Zuffa boxing founder. "Dana? I'm coming for you," Hearn said with a smile. He filmed the video with Alexander Usyk's manager, Sergey Lapin. He was in Spain visiting the gym where Anthony Joshua was training alongside Usyk. The message was clear: "I'm around real fighters, I'm getting ready. Where are you?" Hearn sized himself up against White and liked what he saw. Both men possess a distinct physical edge. Hearn stands at approximately 6'5", significantly taller than White, who measures around 5'11". Conversely, White boasts legitimate sparring experience, adding depth to the matchup's intrigue. Hearn had 6 inches of height, a decade less wear on his body, and a promoter's innate understanding that this fight would transcend the sport. "I'm very limited, but I'll have a right go, I'll tell you. I'll get myself in good shape, and I'm a big lump, and I think I'll knock him out." But Hearn also showed a rare flash of vulnerability mixed with pragmatism. "But also, if I get knocked out and I make $30 million, it's not the saddest day in the world, and people would find it quite amusing." There it was, the honest calculus. Even a loss at $30 million is a win in life. The question now was no longer whether the money existed. The question was whether Dana White actually wanted to get hit in the face. While the boxing match talk between White and Hearn was escalating, the business war underneath it was intensifying at a pace that few could have predicted. And the epicenter of that war was a 29-year-old British welterweight named Conor Benn. Conor Benn agreed to a multi-fight deal with Zuffa Boxing, just days after appearing on Netflix against Regis Prograis. As part of the co-main event with Tyson Fury and Arslanbek Makhmudov, Benn defeated Prograis via unanimous decision and moved to 24-1 in his career. The fight took place at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London on April 11th, and Benn, the son of British boxing legend Nigel Benn, earned a solid victory, winning all 10 rounds on some cards. "We signed a one-fight deal with him," White told Stephen A. Smith on ESPN's First Take. "Now, we have signed a 2.5-year, 5-fight deal with him to stay with Zuffa Boxing." Benn suggested UFC President Dana White and WWE President Nick Khan were big reasons he decided to join Zuffa Boxing. UFC, WWE, and Zuffa Boxing are properties under TKO Group Holdings. When you look at what he's done with UFC and what Nick Khan has done with WWE, it's absolutely phenomenal. Benn said, "I plan on taking over, and it's absolutely a privilege for me to be a part of that journey." That stung Hearn deeply. This wasn't just losing a fighter to a competitor. This was losing a fighter he'd nurtured for nearly 10 years, to a man who had been in boxing for less than 12 months. Benn was originally signed with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing, but left the promotion abruptly after his contract ended. This made headlines as Hearn and Benn started feuding over interviews, and the financial scale of the deal made it sting worse. Turns out Conor Benn really made $15 million from just one fight with Zuffa Boxing. That's a staggering purse for someone who isn't a unified world champion, and it represented a level of investment that Matchroom simply couldn't match. Hearn publicly acknowledged as much when the deal first happened. Matchroom had the right to match the offer but couldn't come close. White was reshaping the landscape with blunt financial force, and Hearn was left scrambling to reframe the narrative. He questioned whether the business model was sustainable. He pointed out that the Benn Prograis fight had been criticized as underwhelming for its $15 million price tag, but none of that changed the fact that Benn chose White over Hearn, not once, but twice. White also continued to build out his roster aggressively. Conor Benn isn't the only one to have signed a multi-fight deal with Zuffa Boxing. Jai Opataya, Ife Ajagba, and Callum Smith have also signed multi-fight deals with Zuffa, and there were even rumors that White had tried to lure Anthony Joshua away from Matchroom entirely. White tried to poach the biggest name in Matchroom's stable. The Matchroom boss has opened up about an unexpected approach from Dana White to lure Anthony Joshua away from Matchroom. The longtime promoter explained that the situation first came to light through media reports, catching him completely off guard. "I'll tell you a story because Dana White's relevant," Hearn said. "About 2 contracts ago, the media ran a story. AJ in talks with Dana White. Every one of these moves added fuel to the fire. Each signing, each public slight, each press conference jab turned the business rivalry into something more personal, and that personal bitterness is exactly what made the boxing match talk feel less like a publicity stunt and more like a genuine desire to settle something that boardrooms and contracts couldn't resolve." Hearn summed it up bluntly. Hearn also expressed his displeasure at the slurs that White often directs at him, stating that the fight might just be an answer to the name-calling. "It takes 2 to tango, I'm telling you. He called me out for a fight, and I'm telling you, I will fight him. Put some respect on my name. All jokes aside, I don't like the way he keeps calling me a PY, because I'd fight him. So, we can find out who's the bigger PY." The insults had clearly gotten to him. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about pride. And then, just like that, the momentum stopped. On April 18th, Dana White was at UFC Winnipeg. He was asked about Eddie Hearn, about the fight, about all of it. "Listen, Eddie says a lot of dumb shit," White told reporters after UFC Winnipeg. "I'm getting used to it. Eddie said that me and him are the biggest fight in boxing. Therein lies the problem with boxing, and the fact that a fight promoter who's actually put on big fights and has a stable of good fighters would say something that F-turret's stupid is starting to not be as shocking as it was in the beginning. The language had shifted. Gone was the fly out here and will box energy. In its place was dismissiveness. White was no longer engaging with the idea of the fight. He was ridiculing it. He was ridiculing Hearn for believing it could happen. White responded after Saturday's UFC Fight Night, criticizing Hearn heavily, but stopping short of denying the claims about the fight. That's the part that matters most. He didn't deny backing out. He just attacked Hearn, and Eddie Hearn, he noticed. Hearn disagreed, telling the media following Ben Whitaker's win against Brian Nahuel Suarez on Saturday that White is choosing to back out of a boxing match against him and not the other way around. "Listen, POIY, Hearn said of White, 'You called me out, I accepted. Where's your balls gone, PY?' Unfortunately, Dana White backed out of the fight." That was April 19th, 2026, at a Matchroom boxing event. Hearn stood at the podium and directed those words straight into the cameras, knowing full well that White and the entire combat sports internet would see them within minutes. It didn't take Hearn long to issue a response, as he addressed White's comments the same day at the Whitaker-Suarez post-fight press conference. "So you called me out for a fight. I accepted," Hearn said. "Listen, PY, if I'm a PY, then come show me I'm a PY." Now he's going, "I'm 57 years old. No, you told me I wouldn't do it and I'm a PY. So what are you? An old PY." It appears the fight is dead, at least for now. But the fallout from this chapter extends well beyond whether 2 promoters will ever lace up gloves. Paddy Pimblett has been watching the Dana White and Eddie Hearn feud unfold with amusement. Pimblett was in attendance at Hearn's Matchroom boxing event in Liverpool to support close friend Molly McCann, and found himself in the middle of the latest chapter of a promotional rivalry that has seen the 2 executives trade insults publicly, float the idea of fighting each other, and take shots at each other's businesses across multiple platforms. Pimblett, a UFC fighter attending a Matchroom event, offered the most honest assessment anyone in the industry has given. They're having a little bit of a mad spat at the minute. Without being disrespectful to either of them, it's very teenage girlish, but they'll get over it. But then Pimblett said the thing that nobody else in either man's orbit had the courage to say out loud. The funniest thing is if they fought each other, they'd get paid well more than what the fighter's getting paid. 30 mil each. No boxers getting that under Eddie Hearn, and no UFC fighters getting that under Dana. They'd earn more dough than the fighters fighting. You know what I mean? That's the funniest thing about it. And they've got nothing on any fighter they've got, but you know, that's just the way the world works. That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath the entire saga. 2 men who make their livings off the backs of fighters who bleed for purses that are a fraction of what these 2 non-fighters would earn for a glorified sparring session. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. This is not about making a fight. It is about controlling how fights are made. Boxing and the UFC have always represented contrasting models. Boxing is fragmented, flexible, driven by negotiation and individual deals. The UFC is centralized, controlled, structured around a single promotional authority. Dana White wants to bring the UFC model to boxing. Centralized control, consistent scheduling, one powerful entity calling the shots. Eddie Hearn represents the old guard of boxing promotion. Relationships, handshake deals, multi-platform flexibility. The fact that both men ended up challenging each other to an actual fistfight is perhaps the most honest expression of what this business war really is. It's personal, it's territorial, and it's far from over. White still runs Zuffa Boxing and is signing fighters at a relentless pace. Hearn still runs Matchroom and is expanding into talent management with UFC fighters. Turki Alalshik still sits in the middle, capable of making or breaking any deal either man wants to put together. The chess pieces haven't stopped moving. The only thing that stopped was the talk of two promoters actually punching each other. But if we've learned anything from this saga, it's that in the world of combat sports in 2026, nothing stays dead for long. The money is too good, the egos are too big, and the cameras are always rolling.